Guys, I want to welcome you to another episode of the Advisory Board Podcast. And I've got with me a good friend of mine, Vaughn Sigmon, who we had on a couple months ago. And we started down this road about like the keys to consultative selling. And we talked about selling with empathy and selling with and empathy before expertise and active listening, a few key things that are kind of a lost art in selling. The reason I've got Vaughn with me here is he is an expert in franchising. I think if you remember, he was involved in kind of blowing up CarMax on the Western United States. And so he's an expert in this area. Funny enough, used car guy that's actually an incredibly consultative salesperson. That's why CarMax was so successful during that era. So I thought it would be helpful to get Vaughn back. Vaughn, welcome back to the show.
Good to be back, Dave. I always enjoy speaking with you and your audience. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, we're super happy to have you with us. So let's talk about what we're going to do next, guys. So if you listen to that part one, essentially, we're going to have part two today of kind of the art of consultative selling. And Vaughn, maybe if you don't mind, why don't you if you can give us a recap on a couple of things like selling with empathy and active listening, a few of those things we talked about last time as a framework to start. We're going to build upon that and give you kind of the part two of our advice on consultative selling best practices.
Yeah, so happy to do that. Let me frame it a little bit. Most people who either own a franchise or are selling a franchise, but it's own. Let's talk about how to gain clients, get customers without being salesy. That's the avoidance that many people have. Is I don't want to be salesy, and I get that. And there's also even the people who want to be salesy often do it incorrectly, so they end up being underperformers or mid-level performers. There's a right way and a wrong way, and it starts with your mindset. We talked about that a little bit. It's the empathy before expertise. What does that mean? I've got to be more concerned with the needs of the prospective customer than what I have to sell. Because there are going to be times that you're with a prospective customers that what service or product you provide is not the proper product for them. It's not going to help them. That's where salesy comes in, is you're trying to push something on somebody that they don't want. And that's where the whole idea around pressured sales. So we don't do that, don't encourage that, should never do that. And it really just turns people off. So let's talk about the right way to help prospective clients. We talked about making it about them. That's the empathy. And you have to wait. You have to be patient. You don't want to jump in and start telling them how you're going to solve the one problem that they brought to you so far. There's many other opportunities to solve their problem that is going to build value. One of the biggest objections people get for offering their services or product is price. If you are a consultative salesperson, what I'm about to share with you builds value. And there's an old saying in the marketing and sales world, price is only an issue in the absence of value. Right.
Yeah,
and
totally.
well, and listen, in my old world, I've got a really big taste of this with CarMax. You could not pay more for a used car than you do at a CarMax store. They're not the lowest priced person, but they sell 5 times, literally 5 times the number of cars anybody else does. Why? Because the people who shop at CarMax see the value of going there. It's low pressure. It's designed around the customer. It's all every computer faces the customer. There's no haggle. You don't have to go through all that BS. And so customers are willing to pay $1,000 premium, $1,000 to $1,500 premium to just have that buying experience. Now let's keep that in mind. Let's build the value and how you're going to come across. And it's really about the experience. What experience are you giving them? They're buying you, not your product. Hold on to that. They're really buying you, not the product. You've got a solution, but they really have to trust you. And if you do, there's this balancing act when in any negotiation or sales process where you have to remove the barrier of trust. And once you've removed or minimized that barrier of trust, you're gaining commitment. As you gain commitment, that value comes in, and then the whole objection around, I've got to think about it, or the price is too high, this wasn't my budget, just absolutely vaporizes. So how do we do that? I'm gonna give you some details. It works like this. It's the active listening. We talk about 4 steps. I've got to ask some questions, make some notes. Then I need to paraphrase back to them. Then I need to make I get a commitment that I get that right. And then the last thing is, then I get to make a presentation. Here, I know what your problem is. Here's the solution I can solve for that problem. Let's get into a little more detail.
Before we do, Vaughn, I want to highlight a couple of things, because the way you describe this really resonates with the way I try to coach people how to sell as well. So I want to make sure that it's really clear, guys. So whether you're in franchise development, whether you're in selling at the franchisee level, or you're a franchisor trying to coach your franchisees how to have their staff sell whatever service it is you guys have. This can even be, I mean, even retail sales. This doesn't have to be home services knocking on a door, giving an estimate, although that's, a lot of the people that I intend to work with, because they need a lot of help there. They're higher ticket item sales, but this process is critical. And you said something, we're going to come back to it, but I just want to highlight a few things because I want you to take note. One, you have to care more about solving their needs than closing a deal. And having empathy is kind of the key to that. Active listening we've talked about already, but you've got to do this. But also I don't want to glaze over this last part, which is the one that's most important. I think you just said, which is you don't resolve the first problem. You don't resolve the first problem. Everybody wants they're uncomfortable in this discovery process when you're trying to understand the customer's needs. And they're like, oh my gosh, there's a thing. And they jump on it so desperately and try to resolve it. But generally speaking, that first issue is not the real issue. And that's a big mistake a lot of people make. So we're going to go back into that. But you said it a few minutes ago. I was like, wait. Everyone's got to remember this, because it's probably what I'd say the biggest delineator between rookie underperforming salespeople and talented, successful salespeople is having the patience to truly understand what the real needs are. And we'll dive more into that right now. So Vaughn, please continue. I just didn't want to miss that.
So, and I just want to put a little more emphasis on what you just commented on. It's the single biggest mistake people make is jumping in too soon, because we're wired, we're anxious, we're nervous to respond. But that also is a sign that if you tend to do that you're not really listening. All you're doing is waiting for a time to jump in and say what you need to say. That's not active listening. Patience, and a deep level of patience is required for this, is you have to wait for it. To your point, it's hardly ever the first thing they bring up, hardly ever. Sometimes it is, but hardly ever. It's generally the third or the fourth thing. Once you get there, now I'm getting into there's something magic about 3. It's whether people are sharing their problems or talking about issues. It's generally the third thing that is the one that is the hot button. And if I respond too soon, I'm never going to get to that, which creates a landmine for me that I will then short circuit my ability to close a sale or bring somebody to the next level, right? And rarely is this a one conversation make a sale. It's advancing the sale to the next level. So let's advance the sale to a higher level of interest. And it's having the right questions to ask. And they're all open-ended. That's the key to it, is who, what, where, when, how, and then probing within those. I can give you a list of questions. I've got 100 discovery questions, and I can give you those, Dave, if you want to put those as a link into the podcast. But tell me about what's happening with you. That's always a great, what's your situation? What's your problem? Why have you called me? What are we here today to talk about? Sometimes that's, with the right person, that's about all you have to ask, because then they're blue, then you just let them go. Don't interrupt them, let them go. Yeah. But if they're like most people, they'll say, well, I need to get this done. All right. Or I'm interested in doing this. Great. Tell me more about that.
Mhm.
How long have you been looking to do this? Why are you looking to do this? Have you thought about other ways of doing this? What did you find when you went down that course of other ways? Why did you not pursue that? What were you looking for that they didn't provide? Um, if you think about the perfect scenario in this transaction, what would that look like? It's drawing out, remembering that people buy on emotion, and it's hitting their emotional hotspots.
Mhm.
They've got a need, you're going to solve it, hopefully. Uh, and one of the best probing questions was, tell me more.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
right, just tell me more about that. Oh, that's very interesting. Tell me more, expand on that.
Mhm.
And and also keep in mind, if you're talking more than 20% of the time during one of these interactions, you're blowing it.
Yeah.
This is the 80-20 rule. They
Mhm.
need to be sharing 80% of the conversation. You're listening and jumping in, and you're 20% really, you're jumping in with probing questions or acknowledgments to their responses, but your 20% really comes at the end of this. And so you want to gather as much information as you can based on all these discovery questions, and then make notes, because this note is about to be a script for you. So been trying to solve this for a year. Why am I trying to solve it? Well, I'm retired. I'm doing this. This has been bothering me. This is something that has been a challenge for me for years, whatever the situation is. I'm getting into the heart of it. What have you done about it in the past? Well,
Yeah.
I want to put a little more detail into that. Objections. One of the reasons why we try to talk so fast and we're so interested in going to the point too soon is we're trying to protect ourselves from rejection.
Mhm.
And rejections usually come in the form of an objection. Objections come in one of four categories: budget, authority, are they the decision maker? Needs, do they have needs? And what's their timeline? And so if you create your discovery questions around budget, are you the right person? What are your needs? And most importantly, what's your timeline? How soon do you want to resolve this problem? You from their responses now, you can respond back to them with your presentation that dissipates any potential objections, because you know what their budget is, you know that they're the decision maker, you know exactly what their needs are, and then you know when they want to get it done.
Yeah.
So they've told you exactly what you want. If and when you practice not only having the right questions, but your ability to listen, they've just given you the order. They've just told you exactly what you want or what they want. You've made notes on it. And then you can present back to them the solution that you may or may not offer.
Yeah.
And you may not have all the solutions, but offer the solutions you do have, some ideas around how you can help them. And you say it, well, that's great. I appreciate you sharing that with me. Here's what I heard. This is the third step in active, or the second step in active listening. You've been doing it this long. This has been the problem. This is how much it's cost you. You want to get this done in the next 30 days. Did I get all that right?
Mhm.
Please remember that part. You paraphrase back to them their responses to you. Did I get all that right? Because you do that for two reasons. One, if you left something out, they're going to fill it in. Often, as you're paraphrasing back to them, there's something they didn't mention to you. You're getting another data point that's going to be really important.
Right. Yeah.
And then you just have to know your product well enough to be able to tailor the solution based on your product knowledge that hits those points.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
Let
the
me,
sale happens almost every time, almost every time.
and without friction, right? This isn't an
Oh,
awkward discussion. This is where I think a lot of people, they especially in franchising, right? A franchise owner is a salesperson. It doesn't matter what you buy. You've got to be involved in sales, and that's the biggest predictor of what's going to make someone fail. in owning a franchise is if they can or can't sell. So why are we talking about this? Well, because it's one of the most important things for any business. You can have the best product in the world, the best service, the best technology, and if you don't have someone who knows how to sell it, it won't change the world in the way that you envisioned, right? You won't help the local market. And I want to recap a few things here, Vaughn, because this is not sales. This is sales 101. And yet what Vaughn's talking about, guys, is a nuance of that you've got to understand, because you can watch as many Zig Ziglar or, oh my gosh, Gittimer, snippets or whatever you want. But until
Stay away from Grant Cardone. Stay away from that.
Dude, he's just a hype master. I mean, people are Gary V. Like, these are smart dudes, but like they do not know how to train people how to be successful. They just like to hype, and it's hustle porn. That's all that is.
Yeah, it's hustle. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but what there's a key here, and if you haven't read it, I mean, let's give a little kudos to our friend Neil Rackham, right? Because like spin selling was one of the first places where they started to really outline this, and I avoided reading that book for like 15 years because I was like, I'm not going to spin. Like, I'm not going to spin. I'm going to be honest with people. And then I actually read the overview of the book, and I was like, oh crap, I should have read that 15 years ago. And I read it, I was like, yep, I like it. So the structure of question asking is also, you've got to be careful. And I want to insert a comment here about balancing this, because it can feel like an interrogation, right? If you're just asking questions, and also there are different levels of questions. That's the thing I like about how spin selling outlines it. But you've got to ask like the situational questions. You've got to understand what's going on, right? Like, so, tell me what's happening. And a lot of these are still situational questions that we're like understanding what the problems are, but you're interlacing those with what are kind of like your problem questions, your need assessment, like when you're diving deeper into, okay, you told me that you guys are having a hard time selling franchises, and you've told me about these other things, but you also have to understand the impact. Like, okay, so obviously you're frustrated by that. Tell me, how does that affect the team when that goes on? So once you start connecting the situational awareness with the impact of what's happening, sometimes I find this a lot. I talk to franchisors, fran dev groups, FSOs, broker groups. They don't actually understand necessarily the impact of the problem yet. And as I start talking to them, I can see it. I'm like, oh my goodness. So how long are you spending on that? I had this conversation this morning. Oh, you're spending an hour a week on that thing. How much do you pay yourself? $100 an hour. So you're losing $400 a month of human capital, 4.2 weeks per month, right, on that thing. But more importantly, what's not getting done because you're spending an hour on that? Oops, opportunity cost. Now it's not a $400 problem. That might be an $800 or $1,000 problem a month. Well, if what they need to buy is $200, it is a no-brainer, right? But there's more. That's not even where you stop. Now you got to understand, when you talk about what's not getting done, well, the reality is just work an extra hour a day. Well, what time are you wrapping up? 6 or 7. What time's family dinner? Like, all of a sudden you start understanding like what's important for people, right? If they have a family, like, people don't buy franchises because they want to work 12 hours a day, every day. They want to have a lifestyle balance. They want to spend more time with the kids. That's why they're looking at getting away from corporate America. So if you can start understanding the emotional side of things, and this is not manipulation, guys, this is helping people understand the nature of their problems. You're being a consultant at this point. And there are people that manipulate with it, but that's not the point of this conversation. But it's understanding what makes them tick as you're doing discovery, understanding what's important, their priorities, personal and professional, and then understanding what's getting in the way of them doing what they should be doing that's going to make them more successful and happy. That's in my opinion, the core of sales.
100%. What's it costing you in time? What's it costing you in money? How is it holding you back? What is it preventing you from being? How is it preventing you from being successful or reaching your goals? And these questions are very easy to come up with, but you need to be artful with them, in that you need to understand these questions need to be designed around whatever product or service you're offering. And I can't remember whether you and I talked about this or not, but we've got the greatest tool in the history of mankind available to us today that will give you exactly the questions you're looking for based on the product or service that you're offering. And it's called Chat GPT. And in 5 seconds, you'll have as many questions as you tell Chat GPT to give you based on whatever inputs you put into it. It is an amazing tool. And so if you're scratching your head listening to this, oh, I don't know how to come up with these questions, or how do I phrase these questions, ChatGPT will do it for you 100% of the time. So there's your resource for that.
Yeah.
And the art to that, again, is designing your questions that are going to draw out how your product or service services them, solves their need. And once that happens, that's where you don't see books anymore written on closing techniques. Why? Because consultative selling is the approach which requires no closing techniques. It just does not. The next step is always, well, when do you want to get started? When would you like to do this? They've already given you a timeline. If you follow BANT, B-A-N-T, budget, authority, needs, timeline, they're going to tell you, so when do you want to get started? That's all you have to say. And they'll say, well, let's start next week, or how about the first of the month, or that's the close. How hard is that?
Not hard.
It's not hard at all.
And Vaughn, I'll add a thought to that. I've been to a lot of sales trainings as of you over the years, and usually I try to pull one nugget out. Some of them aren't great, to be frank with you. Fortunately, I haven't written the checks. They've been the companies I've worked for have paid for these things. But I remember a year-long program I went through. I won't say the name of it, but I got one thing out of it, and it was good though, and it was good. And I locked into it. And another one I went to, I got one thing out of it. Again, I went to like a big name sales pro, went to his training, and it was all hyped up, and I got actually absolutely nothing out of it. So which is surprising, because I'm always looking. But the one thing that I got from one of the trainings I went to was a local thing they did, was when you're at that stage where there's a close, right? That I like, when should we get started? You've already paraphrased everything they've told you. You've presented the solution. They understand that it's a good fit for their needs. One thing that I like too is to say what it looks like or it sounds like. And let me share some language I like to use. And this, again, we're not talking about manipulation, but you're just trying to put it in front of them in a way that they can say, yes, I think that's a good decision, or no. And if they say no, and there are legitimate objections, or I understand there's not a good fit, you got to walk away. You have to be professional enough to know, like, it's not going to help you in any way to sell someone something that's not good for them. In the end, it'll be the most expensive sell you've got in human capital, reputation, and even in just deployment costs. So, but this is how I like to phrase it. I like to say, so Steve, it sounds like, and then I'll recap. Sounds like you guys are struggling to sell franchises. You got a team that needs tools that will help them create scale. You've got plenty of lead flow, and if you guys don't put something in place that will do this, then you're wasting your money on marketing. And it sounds like we'll be able to resolve that with our sales automation and the texting and the calling, and like these things will help you guys improve your conversion rates, which will fix the marketing ROI issue, and will help you represent you and the team better to the board that's kind of breathing down your throat. Is there any reason why we shouldn't get you started now? And or that's kind of how I'll approach it. Sounds like, and is there any reason? Like those two questions in the structure, it's natural and it's not pushy, and you're actually asking them, is there any reason we shouldn't? And more often than not, people are like, nah, actually we need to get started now. And so that's another approach. I think Vaughn, the way you do it, Vaughn, is a great way to do it, and I think we're quite similar in the way we approach that.
Absolutely.
And that's not a hard close.
And again, that budget question is imperative. What are you planning on spending, or what's your budget in order to resolve this? Often they will not tell you because they believe by revealing their budget that that's just going to become your price. And so they will withhold that information. This is the only thing that I suggest you need to be prepared for with a comeback. And that's, well, okay, I get that. You're trying to figure out what your budget is. You're not quite sure what to spend, but that's where you need to be sharp enough to say, well, I've got a program that's this much, or I've got this service that's this much. But we also have this one and we have this one. It's a good, better, best. Give them 3 approaches to be able to engage you, do business with you, and which one of those makes sense. they're almost always going to respond with one of those. Now I've got the picture so that, and I want to ask that question fairly early on, because if they're a $5 buyer and I'm a $500 seller, there's no middle ground that we're going to reach.
No.
Right. And so I want to cut off this conversation. I don't want to waste their time. I don't want to waste my time if we're miles apart on price. You know, I just sat through a presentation a couple of weeks ago with HubSpot presenting to one of my clients for their CRM and marketing tool. And of course, HubSpot has a great sales team and their sales representative. The third question, so what have you guys budgeted for this program? Mm-hmm. And you know, the sales manager looked at me and I looked at the sales manager and said, well, we're not sure yet. And she says, well, I've got this program, I've got this program, and I get this program. Which one of those makes the most sense? Well, that program. So she just got our budget out of her, right? And so then she knew how to continue phrasing her open-ended questions, her discovery questions. And then when she made a presentation, she made it on the product that we could afford.
Yeah.
Super important.
Rather than the used car sales approach, right? Of, oh, your budget's 11,000. Well, here are six $15,000 cars, right? Like that drives me nuts. I don't know why people do it, but
I don't either. Why the
good, better, best? But good and better should all be in the price range. And if you have a best, throw it out there. Like that's actually not a bad idea to present the upsell, but present the upsell as an option, not as the only option. Like that, I think that's a smart approach.
Well, and we're sold that way all day, every day. You walk into Starbucks, 3 sizes. You walk into a fast food, there's 3 sizes. You're online, you're buying a piece of software, there's always 3 offers. And so I work with a jewelry manufacturer. We came up with 3 offers. We got package A, package B, package C. Which one of those makes sense to you? And they almost always choose B, but now we know what they can spend, and now we're focused on that. It's almost any industry you can build that pricing model.
Yeah, and I find that it's an old school strategy to hold the cost back. It's like, oh, well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Now, as I say those words, hear this also, you don't throw your pricing at people like that. That's not how it works. But when you get to that part of the discussion where you're discussing budgets and people are resisting and they're feeling angst, and that's a tough part of a discussion in sales, then it's important to open the kimono up a little bit and be transparent with people. It's one of our core values, but salespeople should be a lot more transparent than they are. And I won't say names, but in this industry, there's a pretty big player. Their strategy is to have 3 meetings with a customer before they will discuss pricing. And it pisses off everyone. Everyone's like, look, I don't have time for this. I just want to know, what am I talking about, a breadbasket or a Cadillac? Like, I just need to get an idea. And frankly, I think they waste their time. And I'm glad they do. I hope they continue to waste their time doing this, because it makes everyone mad. And they're like, wow, Dave, you're so much easier to work with. In 45 minutes, you've understood my business. You know what I need. You've presented to me what the cost model options are. When can we get started? Right? Like, it makes my life easier because people suck at this process. So,
well, absolutely. And to that point, you need to ask that question fairly early, because they will temper their responses on the rest of the questions, trying to make sure you come in cheap versus expensive. So get that number out there. And here's what I teach people to do, and I'm sure you probably do the same thing, Dave, is you're going to come across this person who says, just cut to the chase. What's the price? What's this going to mean to me? Right. And the uninformed, untrained, unprepared salesperson responds to that.
Yeah.
And you just blew it. You just blew it. And so the response I teach people, and there's variations of this, I'd love to hear yours, Dave, is, well, I don't know enough about your needs yet to give you a price. It could be free. It could be $1 million. Give me an opportunity to learn a little bit more about what your needs are, and then I'll be able to give you the exact price to fit those needs.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I'll share a story, actually, if you don't mind, about that. So I worked for a translation company. We did patent translation for Fortune 10s, Fortune 500s. And I was visiting with 3M. They were a client of ours, and up in Minneapolis. And the inside sales guy reached out. He's like, "Hey, Dave, I managed the enterprise sales." He's like, "Dave, I just set an appointment with Medtronic's chief legal officer, really sharp guy." He's like, "You're going to be in Minneapolis. Would you be willing to take an appointment? I know you're flying home, but can we move that around, and can you meet with him before you fly?" And I was like, 100%. I wasn't on that team where we were prospecting, but I was in town. And he's like, "That's too perfect." So I showed up to this guy's office. Medtronic's an amazing company, super respectable. And I walk into the chief legal officer's office, and he's a guy by the name of Mike Jarrow, super sharp guy, but very busy. You can imagine the kind of stuff he probably has to deal with every day. They just didn't have time to talk about translations, but he took the appointment. So I walk in, and he goes like this. He's like, who are you? I'm like, "Yeah, I'm Dave. I'm here with the company was called Multilink." And he's like, "Oh, what is this about?" And I was like, "It's you Mike Iverson talked to you about us, about you had some needs with your patent translation." And he's like, "Oh, all right, go ahead and pitch me." And it's funny because I sat down, and I had a younger member of my team with me, and I was like, "Oh, well, Mike, that's not how this works." He's like, "What?" And I was like, "I don't know anything about, I mean, I know you guys are doing patents. I don't know anything about your business. Like, tell me about your process. How does the team work? What kind of issues you run into? Like, until I understand any of that stuff, Mike, I'm not going to throw anything at you. That'd be a waste of both of our time." And he goes, and then he does this. Here's his body language. He goes, "Oh, well, okay." And so he just started telling me about his business, and everything about that was right. And I'm not trying to say I'm like a super genius here, but like I refused. That was like that's a big account, right? Like huge opportunity for that business. But I had the discipline and the knowledge to know if he and I start talking about, we could start talking about what am I going to charge you per word for Vietnamese to English language pairs. Like that's what he expected me to do, because other dumb people do that when they show up to try to sell them, but that's not how you sell. So
because you haven't built value, you haven't discovered their needs, and so too soon, and you're done.
Yeah, it's a problem. So let's talk about franchising for a minute. Like, as we kind of, well, let's tie a bow around this for people. And there's so much more, right? Like, I've got one more thing I've got to share about this, because we've been talking about discovery. But if I sat down with you and you were trying to sell me something, and you just asked me questions for 20 minutes, I'm getting tired. I'm getting fatigued. I'm not getting value. I'm feeling like I'm being interrogated. So one other thing to interlace here, and I train my team on this too, and they're great at it, is you have to interlace insights and value with people as you're asking them questions. For example, like when people, like if you haven't read The Challenger Cell yet, read the book. I love that book. That was one of those books I read. I'm like, yes. Why is nobody talking about this? I love that book. So, but as I'm asking you questions and you say, "Yeah, well, we're having an issue where our customer acquisition cost is like, it's cost us about $16,000 to get a franchise deal done." Then I'll say, "Well, okay, that, how long has it been going on? I want to learn about that." Then I'll often say, for emerging brands, restaurants, high investment opportunities in very niche markets, that's not too far off. But I do know people that are in your industry that are in the the $8,000 to $12,000 range as well. So it can be better. What have I done? I've given them a reason to understand that I know a lot and I can help them. And I'm not lying. These aren't things I make up. These are things I've researched. I've curated content. I interview people. I talk to hundreds of brands. So I know this data. And sometimes people will want to do business with you because you are the person that they know has the answers that can help them succeed. And your software just happens to be a good fit, or your service or product just happens to be a good fit. HVAC guys, we replaced our HVAC system because the individuals that came to my home recommended things nobody else talked about, and they understood the needs of my home. Like, ultimately, you're trying to maintain the same temperature upstairs and downstairs. We should do this and reconfigure your furnace so it does that. It'll actually save you money on your bill every month. I was like, oh, well, you're getting my money. Because everyone else just looked at my furnace, my blower, and my compressor and said, "Here you go, here's a price." So,
and it had nothing to do with price. It had everything to do with the solution.
Yeah, value, right? Value. Like you talked about that early on today. If you are not providing value in the process to the customer, they don't trust you. And trust is the commodity of exchange in sales. So you have to create that somehow. And I think you've given us a bunch of great advice about how to do that today. But sounds like we could probably do a part 3 on this one, Vaughn, because there's
love to. You
Yeah.
know, I'm down.
Yeah. I appreciate you here sharing these insights, guys. Vaughn, you can find him on LinkedIn. I'd highly recommend you connect if you're looking for some help, some coaching in your sales strategy and process. Vaughn's a great resource for that. And Vaughn will probably schedule a part 3 sometime soon, because I feel like we don't quite get through enough in these sessions. But thanks for all the insights today.
Thank you, Dave. It's always a pleasure. Talk to you soon.
Sounds great.